Okay, we're going to get started. Good morning and welcome to our Superintendent Search Work Session, April 3rd, 2023. This time is 9 o'clock and we're going to get started. I'm going to have Mrs. Brizendine do introductions and get us all moving forward.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, Attorney Duggan. McPherson and Jacobson have set Mr. Ralph Ferry here as well as Miss Marjorie Wallace. What they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and go over phase one with you. So they will ask you some of your questions. Go ahead and put up some notes there for you guys to go ahead and get started to see exactly what we'll be looking for in a superintendent.
You know how to press the buttons, press push, and if it's lit up green, you guys are good to go. And we'll remind you if not.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much for having us. I know you met Dr. Joel, who was here for the proposal presentation. My name is Dr. Ralph Ferry. Quick introduction, then we'll get going so you get to know me a little bit. I am a retired superintendent, 21 years in New York and New Jersey. First New Jersey, 34 years in New Jersey, and then on the western end of Long Island in New York next to Belmont Racetrack was one of the communities that I had 5 high schools. So New York, obviously smaller districts, but that was the largest central high school district in New York State. Sewanaka Central High School District is the name. And currently I'm the regional director for the Eastern region for McPherson and Jacobson, from Maine all the way to Florida, to Ohio, down to around Louisiana, all the states to the east. So thank you for having us. We're really looking forward to working with you. I know you've met Dr. Wallace previously, so we'll be able to proceed. I did send an agenda for today, and let me just go through that quick agenda just to let the public know and to you know exactly what our goals are for today, and then we'll begin. Certainly want to first identify who the point of contact for the district is, as that will help us in terms of the search process. And then collaboratively develop with you 4 to 5 criteria that we will then be able to use throughout the search for our advertisement and for when we look at applicants and certainly going forward with you as a board in that area. Agree upon a tentative calendar that I put together. The calendar, when I go over it, is pretty aggressive in terms of timelines, but we think it's important to be aggressive because there's so many superintendent openings throughout the country. I mean, we're busy, and there are superintendent openings everywhere you look. And I know there are many in Florida, many. And so that's important. Review the process of solicitation of stakeholder input from the county. And remember, and I know that Dr. Joel shared this with you. It's your search, and we'll do with whatever you think is appropriate in terms of that stakeholder input. Agree upon the meetings and the online survey. I know that we normally put it up in English and Spanish, but perhaps in the county it may also be needed in Russian and Haitian. So we'll take care of that and work with your communications department to make sure that occurs appropriately. Review the advertising venues, which are included in the proposal, and that's on the agenda. And then answer any and all questions that you have regarding the next several weeks and few months regarding the search. So let's begin with a point of contact.
So that would be also Kathy Tompkins is our administrative assistant. So everything should go through her, obviously through Sunshine, and then copy the chair. But then Kathy will make sure that all board members get all that information at the same time.
And that's absolutely perfect. Okay. That's what we recommend, that we can work collaboratively with Kathy. She'll send it through the board chair, through you, and then that all board members get all the information. Correct. Perfect. That's perfect. So that's easy. So let's move then to, I know that you were asked to bring your top 3 criteria. You may have more for what you want to see in your next educational leader. So I'll kind of facilitate that. Dr. Wallace will just take some notes up on here so we can see if we can get agreement on those criteria, and perhaps Board Chair Ziegler, if you'd want to call the order in terms of who shares that.
If everyone had a moment, we could start with Mr. Edwards and then just go down the line. I think that might be easiest.
Thank you. That would be perfect. So do you want everyone to give one, or do you want them to give their three?
If you have three, some may duplicate while we go through them. So if you want to start and list out what you have.
That's perfect.
If you have more than three, that's totally fine too. I mean,
Perfect.
just to get us moving.
And in general, sometimes we do get duplicates, so that'd be very helpful. So, Mr. Edwards?
Good morning. For the record, I think everyone here in this room and for the public knows that I am a reluctant participant in this process. So we lost a highly effective superintendent through no fault of that superintendent, and I tried every way I could to prevent that from happening. So I am participating because it's important that Sarasota maintain that bar. We're going to start with that bar, and so the conversations that are important to me are the credentials, the amount of experience, the amount of time that a particular superintendent has spent in education, whether that be as a teacher, whether that be as a principal, whether that be as an administrator or an assistant superintendent. The person that we're replacing had multiple school districts and multiple exposure to the types of ideas and suggestions and vision that would be necessary to come to Sarasota and maintain and better that A rating that we have. So credentials and experience and references, credible references that of folks, preferably in education, but not necessarily limited to education, that can attest to that person's ability. Secondly, everyone uses the word all too frequently. This is unprecedented. And so with that being said, I'm looking for somebody who has high levels of adaptability and proven leadership. People, we live in a world of social media and ever-changing environments and influencers and influences. And somebody who has the agility to really step up and lead through that process, because it appears that education, particularly public education, is under attack. And we need someone who can keep the bar high and maintain that discourse for the protection of public education and for the protection of students and teachers. So high levels of adaptability and leadership. And lastly, which I think is hopefully going to be replicated throughout the conversation at the board level, is this is where Sarasota should be where the achievement gap goes to die. We really are looking for, within those credentials and within the adaptability and leadership, an exposure to a long-range strategic plan that really does address in multiple levels how to close the achievement gap. That would include expertise in multiple health strategies, or mental health strategies, I'm sorry, in instructional strategies. Because what I've seen throughout the country, and particularly in Florida, and then in our own school district, there's no silver bullet that's going to make that happen. But it requires someone like our previous superintendent who understood the fabric of a long-term plan of addressing the close of the achievement gap, and would look for that and to lay it out systemically and in a transparent way, so that the community, the students, the teachers all understood what the goals are, where we're going, what's necessary to get there, and the types of support that are necessary from the board, because it's a team effort. It's really looking at how all of us as one big team can work together to achieve that goal and realize that vision.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Enos.
Well, good morning. So I would also expound on, in regard to that, in regard to the previous experiences, what I would looking at somebody who has been a superintendent previously, what I would like to be as part of that, coming off what Mr. Edwards said, it's regarding their credentials and stuff, but I'm also looking for, I really want somebody looking for educational growth. I don't know how else to say it, as somebody who had a district that was performing at a certain level and actually can be shown proven data to show that they've increased the level of education within that district to a higher level. Not somebody who came in that district was a high level and just maintained it, but somebody who actually comes back with that vision that be able to take us to have a higher educational level for our students. The other thing that I will look for is also I'm interested in professional development of the staff. What do they do to have a robust professional development? Because I think that also assists us with working within the community in regarding to partnerships and bringing in the different community partners, as well as supporting of the teachers in regarding their professional development growth, assistant principals, disciplinarians, guidance counselors. I'd really like to see somebody, because I know the effectiveness of an organization really comes back to the people they hire, but the growth that they get, the professional development that they give them inside the organization for those people to achieve their own personal goals as well. And then the last thing I also have on here is also in somebody that would come in that would have a plan, that would have a vision, that would be able to continue to bring in all of, because if you look at all of Sarasota as a whole, as I've said before, as you know, we shouldn't be second to anyone in this state. And I'm really looking at, to be that, is that how will you get us there? What would be your strategy? Not just here I am, here's my credentials, but how are you going to actually get us to where we want to be, which is we should be number one in everything. Number one is safety security, which we are, could maintain that status, but number one in education, number one in third grade, number one in graduation, just overall, just put us to where we should be because of the community support. And with that vision would include our community partners. I think that's super, super important here in Sarasota, because it takes all of us to be able to make sure that those students, when they leave here, are the best educated and, to be able to come back to this community with their skills, whether it's through a trade, whether it's whatever it is. So I'm also, like I said, I would look for that vision and a plan on what you would do in Sarasota to put us to where we need to be.
Okay.
Excellent. Got all that? Got to write
And
fast.
we're going to get it. Yep, we're going to get it.
I'm from New Jersey. I speak fast too. So.
No, very good. Mrs. Rose?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking for an individual that, give you time to flip the page, that has a history in improving data in an organization, primarily in Sarasota County Schools, are understanding our primary grades reading with a goal of increasing grade level reading achievement at grade 3. I think that's at the heart of everywhere we go. And also, given that Sarasota County Schools have dropped to a 3-way tie for 5th place in the state, that we have an individual that understands how to take an organization and our achievement data and get us back up to being top ranked in the state. And third, someone who understands exceptional student education and the reading curriculum to enhance that, the instruction and the achievement levels in our exceptional student education. And taking all 3 of my priorities and being someone who has the ability to be very transparent with the board and the public on how we're going to get there, but progress monitoring, visibly being able to see us move on regular intervals, that we're making progress in those 3 areas that I think will take our district to a level it hasn't been at in recent years.
Excellent. Give her a second. And then Mrs. Marinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I, as a new board member, I am looking forward to moving forward and not continually bringing up the past, because obviously things were not so wonderful in the past. So like I said, I'm looking for the future, and I'm looking forward to this whole process. So I really spent a lot of time thinking about this too, and I think social skills is a very important part when you're relating to the community. So I would like, this is my highest wish list, to understand fully the role of the school board and the role of the superintendent. And I would like a person that makes K through 3 reading a priority, because we have not been moving forward. We need to spend time, whether it's on our ESE children who have not made progress in reading in like 7 years, and to have some curricular background to go with that. Someone that has a very positive interaction with the whole community and represents the school board and teachers and everybody out in the community. I'd like somebody who has an understanding of the way the school and the district grades are determined, that can really go down and look at that data and be honest with the community that we're not second, that we have slipped. Even though we are a highly effective A-rated district, we're on the cusp. And I want to see us move forward and our students give the full potential. I'd like to that person to put honesty with the public first, the good, and the things we need to improve, and be honest, and not to make that person look good by not being honest with the community. I want that person to know that the school district is a part of the community. We are not the whole community. So we have to work with all our resources, our foundations, our not-for-profits. When it comes to the role of the school counselor, just want everybody to know that the state of Florida is called school counselor, not guidance counselor anymore, and that their role, and they are not mental health specialists, so we need to make sure that they get to do their role. And I want somebody that knows the importance of the arts and work with our arts community. So that is my list. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, going last, there's a lot taken on there that I would have written down, but I want to emphasize the strong communicator piece. Again, I think from a criteria standpoint, I'm not, that's something I think we are all looking for. And from an executive experience, from administration, obviously education being preferential, but there are some experiences that may be outside of the realm or outside of a school district, but still within education. We'll see. But there needs to be sizable administrative experience with a comparable size institution, given and being able to illustrate the data-driven expertise, and similarly, as was mentioned before, examples of I don't know if the turnaround or substantial improvements, whether it's the entire organization or specified area, targeted area, and kind of being able to demonstrate that with backed up by data, not just a nice story. I think one of the areas that it would be nice to be able to emphasize areas of unique expertise. So I know was mentioned exceptional student education or special education, in ELL, English language learners. But again, I don't want to be too narrow. What I'd be looking for is when there's an issue or a challenge that they are able to demonstrate that they were able to solve that. So I think in our area, ESE and ELL are two areas that are high interest, and then certainly reading at the core of all of that. But again, casting a wide net, I think the way I'm looking at it is it's exceptionally beneficial if they can give specific examples to those, but also if they can just demonstrate where they were able to see a problem and have a targeted plan and illustrate that they were able to achieve that. So that would be more of my broader focus. I don't know if I had financial, being able to demonstrate, again, just goes more with the administrative experience, but being able to demonstrate a fiscally sound expertise, how to balance a budget, certain strategies around there. And I think all the rest were taken. So yes, now I know we were talking about criteria. So those are more, are we getting to where you guys need, or do we need more specific?
It's absolutely perfect.
Okay.
So let me just, I'm sorry. Got to remember. So the experience piece, the similar size district piece, administrative, all the things that Mr. Edwards, you talked about, that basically you all talked about. We recommend that we include that information in the paragraph. This was just a draft.
Correct,
this
right.
under the paragraph where it says the qualifications.
Right.
And that's where we put all of that information to ensure that we're getting what you requested in terms of administrative experience, size of the district, and so on. Everything else, what you talked about in terms of the other criteria, I can definitely take this and wordsmith this into 5 criteria and build in the reading and demonstrated. See, what's important is not only be able to speak to what you've done, but you better have examples of how you demonstrated improvement, and I can specifically word that into a focus on reading K to 3, on exceptional students, ESL, special needs students. I can definitely include something in there in terms of finance and, experience with budget and so on. And then a whole piece in terms of the communication and the importance of the understanding that the district is an integral component of the county, that they should, and that it's a demonstrated success in working with foundations and community partnerships and so on. Build that into one of the criteria as well. And I believe that we can definitely wordsmith into 5 criteria. And what I would like to do is take this information, wordsmith it today, get it right back to Kathy, who can then send it to you, send it out to the board, let us know your feelings on it, edits and so on. Suggest the edits back to Kathy. She'll send them to me. And once we get final approval, we will not publish anything without your final approval. And say, okay, this is where we want this. And now we can then use it as the advertisement.
And Mrs. Rose has a question. I really quickly, just procedurally, and this is more for council, I think because of their timeline and then ensuring, again, my practice is making sure every board member gets all the information, and then they have the function of getting Mrs. Tompkins the updates that they want tweaked, as far as authorizing you to go forward and publish it. We don't meet again prior to that. Is that correct? No.
Once, normally the experience I've had is once you send the edits through Kathy, she would then get it to me. I'll correct it all, send it back to you, and then you say, we're ready to go. I haven't had any, but I'd ask Attorney Dugan if that's appropriate.
Well, I think that's fine if there's consensus on the changes. If there's not consensus, I think we would need a special meeting to work through those and come up with a final product.
Well, I guess my question would be is if there's authority that a final authorization, of course, being balanced, making sure all the information is getting back, but then there'd be a final authorization through the chair to say it's allowable. Otherwise, we're going to have multiple meetings, and we have to be realistic.
Then that slows the process down.
Yes,
And I understand you have meetings today, tomorrow, and Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So I can go get this done tonight, get it back to Kathy, and you'll have it by tomorrow.
We do have a lot of meetings in the next couple of days. Well, that will be to our benefit. Okay. I just want to make sure that however we work that out, it is agreed upon, there's consensus, and that we aren't holding ourselves up. Mrs. Rose?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to clarify, please, that I'm not necessarily looking for specific experience in primary grades reading or exceptional student education. I'm looking that an individual can bring forth data that they were able to put
Yes.
together goals, systems, networks, do their research and develop a knowledge base of everything in our primary grades reading, and that they've shown that they can make a significant impact on improvement. I don't want to narrow the focus so
no,
narrowly that it restricts our options, but want someone who can actually put improve the way that our systems and our networks are operating with laser-focused goals.
Yes, I clearly understand that. I was a secondary person primarily as a superintendent and relied on my outstanding assistant superintendent who had a tremendous background in elementary ed and literacy and would be able to demonstrate how the district, through its strategic planning, improved those areas.
Thank you.
I'll just add, if we meet again, we need to notice it in compliance with policy, I think it's 2.22, and there's different ways to have a meeting, one of which is a special meeting, and I think there's a 48-hour notice requirement there in order to do that. So I just point that out for you all in order for you to plan as you think through this process if there's not a consensus on, what the final product looks like.
Okay, we'll move forward, and I'll work just to make sure that you have the information, provide all of us with the draft. Mrs. Tompkins will provide it to all board members. Board members will provide Mrs. Tompkins with any kind of revisions or updates. You'll take those, compile them, and then send that out to us.
So I'll turn it right back to her quickly.
Part of me is almost giving authority to them to just send it out once we've concluded the amount of, I just don't want this to get locked up or jammed up and holding special meetings and all of that. I'm sure, as long as that, I would feel comfortable if we defer to the firm to send that out without having to make we have from a sunshine standpoint, we have to be very cautious, so.
Right.
Absolutely.
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, just in listening to all of the criteria, I think the only place where we're just a bit apart is I am looking for the credentials of someone who has come from education that does have those specific track records and can prove those knowledge. So I've said that. To the opposite side of that, Mrs. Rose seems to think that there should be some flexibility. I think if you just identify the range of what is acceptable to the board, I don't want to hold it up either. And from what I heard, that's the only place that there seemed to have been any slight differences.
Well, I can clarify mine. I think, of course, education experience is preferred, but I think there's a number of different large administrative experiences that could offer potentially casting a wide net, and I think that's important. Having gone through this before, typically, ironically, some of those that have the education tend to rise to the top, but not always, and so I think it's important to cast a wide net. But then we go down to the next step and can narrow in on that. But I think it's beneficial to include, and this is my preference, of that we would have comparable size institution or being able to demonstrate in an executive leadership or administrative role. That's, number one, number two, number three, or somewhere in the cabinet level. And again, education experience is preferred, but we've had some amazing people come from county government to this school district in a high level. And so that's the only point I don't want to be too narrow. Mrs. Rose.
Thank you. Would it be wise to add it to our Wednesday agenda, just in case we needed it to not hold things up? And
I think that worked, but we need to get whatever the final product is, or at least a draft of that, out as soon as possible so that the public has time to consume it and it's done in a transparent way.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think as long as we notice that we're taking action on it, the actual draft, of course, it's best to have it out there if it's a working document. The responsibility is just a requirement to note to the public that we are having a board meeting or taking action on it. And as soon as we have the draft, we're able to provide that. I just don't want to delay us. That's my worry. So I don't know. Let's see how the posture is today, and then to your point, I mean, I think Mr. Edwards made the point of is if a lot of the things that were stated seem to line up, the only question is, perhaps you can highlight that now. How would you recommend recognizing that, to Mr. Edwards' point, that there's an emphasis of interest of someone that, and I don't want to speak for him, but I don't know if it was that did work inside of a school district or has that executive level of leadership at a school district, and then is a comparison to another myself and any others that want to cast a wider net. How would you look at writing that?
So under the qualifications paragraph in the draft, we proposed experience as a superintendent or an essential office leadership position in a diverse suburban, urban. And then would you consider Sarasota suburban, urban, or just suburban?
Mr. Edwards had a comment. Go ahead, Mr. Edwards.
Again, just because it's in the best interest to move things forward, I think we're all kind of on that page. So I think the criteria, again, to incorporate what I would prefer somebody from education, Mrs. Ziegler is open-minded to someone outside of. I think you could just use the phrase experience ranging from, and just include those parameters, because that, I think that says, as a previous recruiter, that says what you needed to say. And from my perspective, suburban, urban, this is just me speaking, you'd have to ask the rest of the board, but 47% of Sarasota is at or below the poverty level. So not labeling it suburban, urban, I think poverty as a criteria, and how that affects Title I schools and the general runnings of the school district is an important component.
Okay.
Mrs. Rose.
I'm just asking that given this is the piece that we're working out, that you reiterate how you would state that.
Yes, so I would modify that. We could state it as experience as a superintendent or essential office leadership position in the diverse suburban, urban, economically diverse, similarly sized district, and we use the word is preferred. So this way, it permits that range in terms of you having the ability to, and us having the ability, depending upon the candidates.
So clarifying, you're not limiting it to someone who's come from a central office in a school district.
That's right.
Yeah, I might strike central office. I think I might put. I don't like because I think central office is certainly narrowly to, I think, school district, but I think maybe if we just put administrative in a comparable, I mean, you can wordsmith it, but in a comparable sized institution, and then I think education experience preferred. I think that goes without saying, but I think we can kind of set that tone.
Right, so.
Okay, and the other piece that's important is obviously, and again, we use, stated here, it says doctorate and Florida superintendent certification or eligibility for it are required, as is a preference for living in the county. So how important is the doctorate to you?
So I'm going to chime in because I don't see anyone. I know in our past times, I think that it's highly beneficial or highly ranked for doctorate. However, again, I think at the first step, I'm more inclined to cast a wider net, and then as a board, we narrow in. So I think master's preferred, and then I think that the Florida Superintendent Certificate, I think maybe the emphasis of eligibility to.
Right. So stating instead of just doctorate, I would recommend stating doctorate preferred. That doesn't limit you to someone. They could have a master's. Okay. So doctorate preferred and Florida superintendent certification or eligibility for it are required, which you have to have the certificate to
Get the job.
serve as a superintendent.
Sorry.
As is preference for living in the county. Is preference for living in the county also appropriate?
well, I'm going to let them speak, and then I'll respond to that. Mr. Edwards, and then I have Mrs. Rose.
To my knowledge, it is statute that they live in the county.
Right.
That wasn't what I chimed in for.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to save a little time. I do draw the line on doctorate, and I'm emphatic about that and trying to impress that on the board. I'm flexible in terms of sourcing industries or where they might come from and if they have proven track records. But honestly, we had that. And as I established the criteria of wanting to keep the bar high, this is not a school district to come and cut your teeth on, which, in previous conversations with the recruiting firm about our environment and all of the kinds of issues that happen here, this is just not, and Sarasota should not settle for, it's 46,000 students growing, and it demands a level of expertise. So I really hope I can impart on the board that it's not preferred to have a doctorate degree, it's essential.
Thank you, Mrs. Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to keep some flexibility in the point in going with McPherson from my individual perspective was to have a national search, which we haven't had in quite a while, and to look at what's available out there. And as you look at those folks and our community looks at those folks, that we are able to make the best match. And two of our most successful superintendents in the 3 decades that I've served this community did not have a PhD, and in no way, shape, or form do I want to limit it to that. And that is my valid, recognizing, Wilma Hamilton and Lori White, who were both extraordinarily successful. And I think that, that we're doing preferred with the education experience, but I think that the board members and our community and our staff can land with a very good match. I do not want to limit it in that. That was my rationale for going with McPherson and Jacobson as versus someone in the state of Florida. We've done that, and in my opinion, it restricts us significantly.
Thank you, Mrs. Marinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Rose said very eloquently what I was going to say, but also from a person that worked in this district for 35 years. Yes, doctorate preferred, but 2 of our most highly successful superintendents did not have doctorates, and they came within this system. So if there are people out there with those kind of qualifications who basically had the whole picture, and that's what I would look for. So I don't want to limit it, but it would be preferred, but I do not want to limit, because just because you have a doctorate doesn't mean you're going to be the most successful superintendent in Sarasota or any in the United States. So want to look at people for what they've done than what their credentials are. So thank you.
Yeah, I think casting the wide net has proven to be that as beneficial, and I think the points well stated about Mrs. Hamilton and Mrs. White. And I think I think that their leadership skills are going to be the most important to me than any kind of designation, but certainly preferred, I think, illustrates that there's value in such extensive educational background. But again, I think my goal is to start with a wide net, and I think, again, as I've seen every time, that naturally the people, and I'm sure you can attest this, the people rise to the top very quickly. It's not very difficult to identify who those are. So, any other comments? Okay, so so you have clarity on that one, and then I guess the only other one I wanted to just tighten up was the suburban urban similarly sized. Do we want to?
Right.
I don't know how I would classify Sarasota, so I'm like, I don't want. I think that where did you say that diverse Do you have a suggestion, Mrs. Rose? Go ahead.
I think if, food for thought, it would be to focus in on moving an organization.
That's what yeah.
Versus, again, and as Madam Chair, Mrs. Ziegler stated, the candidates are going to rise to the top. I don't want to limit it. Again, it's a national search. With my individual intention is to really find the cream of the crop nationally and not restrict ourselves to narrowing it.
No, I agree. I think, and even when I say similar in size, I think that's beneficial, but it shouldn't be the end all only. They're going to have to demonstrate their ability. I mean, if you think about the challenges that rise from, for example, a smaller district to a larger district, they're similar issues, but the scale is not to be taken lightly. But again, they're going to have to be able to demonstrate that. So however you would suggest making, trying to transfer what we're looking for, but not so narrow so that, because there could be someone that has done amazing turnaround in a district that may not be considered comparable to ours, whether it be size or budget or even demographics, but that leadership skill to see something, utilize data, and have a plan and execute on it is what I think would be most important. Mr. Edwards.
In terms of wordsmithing, I guess what I'm most concerned about is that this wide net criteria doesn't transfer into that we're willing to settle. That needs to be that Sarasota demands high levels of expertise and proven track records within the flexibility framework of the search process. So I don't want any potential candidates or the community to misinterpret that we're willing to settle. And that, however you get those words across, that's important to me in terms of transparency to the community as well as to potential candidates.
Thank you. I think I have my direction, and let me just respond to your concerns. And I agree absolutely with what you're saying. And I know that Dr. Joel probably emphasized this as well when he went through the proposal with you. We don't want to settle either, because our goal is to place a superintendent in your county that has longevity, because that's important to us in terms of our track record, in terms of placement, that our placements are in their positions, because we know that longevity in terms of a superintendent translates also to longevity with the board, and both of those issues translate to positive student achievement. So absolutely, we are not going to settle. We're not going to settle. And the major focus is going to be on those criteria that you shared with us that I'm going to put together in 1 through 5, and leaving some flexibility in terms of the pool of candidates, but it's clear in terms of what we need to look for from what I'm hearing from you. So thank you for that. So I'll put this all together and get it and turn it around to Kathy, hopefully by this evening.
If I may, my suggestion would be to get it out and for all of you all to review it. And if there is any heartburn or concern, that we add it to Wednesday. But if there is a consensus, because I'm hearing a general consensus here, if there's a consensus, and if you don't timely communicate an objection to Kathy, then it just go out. If somebody has a major problem with it, because I think we have an obligation legally to be deliberate and to approve things in the sunshine if there's not a consensus. But I'm hearing a consensus, and until we see the devil's in the details, and until we see it, we won't know. But if everybody has no major heartburn or concern about it, that it just go out.
Okay. I'm good with that. Everyone else? Okay, very good. Thank you,
Thank you.
Patrick. All right.
Okay, moving on to the next, the search calendar, which I shared with you. Get that.
Do I have?
So obviously we're doing this work today, April 3rd. We have to talk about how you want us to get information, solicit information from your stakeholders. And I've included a wide range of potential there in terms of we will put together the online survey, which will ask the communications department to notify your county residents, your employees throughout the district, all of your students, in terms of when that survey will be up on the website. Typically, we put it up for a week, but what I'm finding is, particularly in larger county districts, they'd like it up longer than that. So that's totally up to you. I'll put some suggestions in terms of the length of time that survey is up. And then we would survey your groups, and we can do that either via Zoom meetings or in-person stakeholder meetings. So we would have to determine from you who those groups are, who you want us to survey, to work with in terms of getting that information from the stakeholders. And that includes representatives from the teaching staff, the administrative staff, community members, advisory groups, you name it, in terms of who you want us to specifically meet with. And most importantly, which is very important to me, is to meet with students, because we really want to hear from students as well, because they are normally right on target in terms of what they're looking for in their superintendent, and find them to be an outstanding resource. So we could put together some suggestions with, and I can send them to Kathy, or perhaps you can share with Kathy what groups you want us to meet with, and if you want them to be met in person or via Zoom. That's totally up to you.
Let's hear. So let's get some feedback from the board. So Mrs. Rose, I know you have your marker on.
Oh, thank you. Just a question, because is it Dr. Joel or Mr. Joel that worked with us in the first meeting?
Right.
And he had stated he was going to be the point of contact, and I'm just clarifying. Is he?
Yes, he's still going to be involved as well.
Okay.
Absolutely. He's away on vacation this week.
Oh, good. I'm glad that he's getting his time away.
But I'll be working with, the team will be Dr. Joel, myself, Dr. Wallace, and Dr. Hamilton.
Okay. 'Cause
Dr. Hamilton's out of she's in Georgia.
he had touched on this, and I thought he had, and the reason I'm asking is, one, for consistency of what we have communicated or have heard put forth in suggestions, which I thought were win-win for where we are in Sarasota County with change. I'm looking for a positive, united focus that he had stated having very focused questions, whether they're in the form of a survey or you're bringing community members together, so that the feedback that we are getting is forward moving and focused on the quality of candidates. So
Yeah.
I think one of the,
Can I share those questions? Did he share the specific questions
Sure.
with you?
No, but
Okay.
he discussed, because one of my inquiries to him was that we have at times some negativity and some input that is more aligned to discontent versus what we want, what we're looking for, and what would work. So for that feedback to give us the highest quality information on selecting a candidate with their qualities, background, and aptitude, that's kind of where I'm going with this, of what would be those survey questions across the board with individuals or groups.
Great question. We ask 4 questions, open-ended. The first 2 questions help us recruit. We want to know and ask all of the groups, what are the positive aspects of living in the county? And we know what they are. It's a beautiful location and so on. But we want to hear from the community in terms of the offerings that the county has, the services. And we do get an excellent list from from the community regarding that. The second question, though, we want to specifically look at the positive aspects and programming that is occurring within the school district itself, because we want to hear about the positive, because there's a lot of positive, because candidates will ask us that. Tell me about the programs. Tell me about the opportunities that students have in the Sarasota County schools. The third question is generally what everyone would like to go to, and we do ask it. What are the challenges that the next superintendent is going to have to address if he or she is going to be successful? And we get a list of that as well. Fourth, that's where we get to tell us about the qualities, the personal character, the experiences that you would want to see in your next superintendent of schools. Okay? And that's where that gives us a tremendous insight into what people are looking for in terms of the type of person that they want to work in the district. Now, those same 4 questions are asked on the website on that survey as well, in the languages that I mentioned. And then all of that gets sent to the home office. We collate it all. We put it all together in a report to you, and we give an executive summary of the themes that we're hearing. The themes that we're hearing from each of the stakeholder groups, and then the themes that we're reading from the stakeholder survey. And we keep it consistent to that, open-ended, those 4 questions, same 4 questions with every group we work with. The only thing we do, the only edits we make on the online survey is profanity, and if they mention particular individual teachers or administrators or board members' names, we take that out. And we report that information by category. So we say the teachers told us, the community told us, parents told us, students told us, and so that people feel free to share. And from my perspective, and I've done many, many of these, we get really excellent results. And we'll then come back to you and have a conversation about what we've learned, so you have a clear understanding of what the community's telling you. Of course, you'll read it, but we also like to give a summary. So that's what Dr. Joel was referring to when he was saying those specific questions.
And thank you for that. My pause comes from that we do have organized groups of community members that may perceive themselves as bipartisan or nonpartisan, that in my perception are very much politically aligned. And some of the feedback that we get or that permeates in the community is more, in my individual perception, legislatively driven or State Department of Education driven. And my question is, how are we separating that out? It drives a lot of public comment that could possibly have greater merit in Tallahassee during legislative sessions versus seeking the quality of our next superintendent. So, and that tends to be from whatever side you may or may not see yourself on, tends to be a loud voice. And as one board member, I'm compelled to want a whole community quality voice versus those that are organized and very deliberately sending in common messages to overpower the rest of the community. Mm-hmm. So how does that figure into your 4 questions? The riddle of the day.
Yes, thank you for that.
It's a valid point, though.
Well, having served as a superintendent for 21 years, I had those kinds of groups in my communities. And I don't know that you can prevent some of those initiatives and those efforts. But I also have seen in these surveys a tremendous number of people that are saying just the opposite. So there is, in my experience, been balance in terms of what we get. It's important for your communications department to really get the message out to the community, the parents, the teachers, the administrators, that this survey is open, it's available. We tell the people that we meet with, sometimes I've been in community stakeholder meetings. I was in one recently last year in the spring in Western Virginia, and they had two polarized groups scheduled for the same session. And it was my role to facilitate that meeting and get both sides of where folks were coming from, very opposite politically, okay? Taking the information, presenting to the board. But you as a board, you know your community, and you're gonna know where that information is coming from. Now, I don't know that there's any, because it's public, and the sunshine laws in Florida are specific about that, but it's not any different in other states, because they post that stakeholder report on their website so that everyone can see it.
I'm all for posting it in the transparency and the sunshine. That's not my point whatsoever. My point is to make sure that we are exposing our entire community and what that looks like, that we aren't just getting a very small percentage of folks that are highly organized
Right.
in common themes. So I think that it isn't, I want to reiterate that, it is in no way, shape, or form not wanting the opinion that any of us may or may not like, because there's opposition out there in opinions. My goal is to make sure that the entire community is represented.
So then my suggestion would be that we send our team down here,
right.
all four of us, and for as many days as we need, 2 or 3 days. I know we just sent a team into Baltimore County, Maryland for 4 full days and evenings, and that we make sure that we meet with the entire cross-section of organizations and groups throughout the county.
And that's what Dr. Joel had alluded to, which I thought solved the issue. That's why I just wanted to
So
revisit.
I would suggest we don't do Zoom meetings, that we have in-person meetings, and we have, in the evenings, we can have, community forums that are open, that are advertised.
Right. And
Well, I
advertise.
think because we're, our legislators are in session and there's, the legislative process is churning, that that we really need to hear from our entire community.
Right.
I agree. That's why I would recommend the in-person stakeholder
I
meetings.
like that.
I
Thank
like
you.
that too. Mr. Edwards, go ahead.
And
Yeah, I was just going to say that
department to
the
get that word out,
adaptability and the leadership skills that I mentioned earlier that I was looking for, I think having as transparent and all in-person stakeholder meetings are essential. Craig, I'm sorry to, I know that when we did town halls, you had this incredible software that just really captured ideas and thoughts extemporaneously, and I'd love to see you guys partner in that. I had criteria of stakeholder thoughts in terms of having town halls that we could market right into our PTOs, that we're getting more parental advertisement going right into the schools and trying to reach into that population as quickly as possible. I think we need to establish a student advisory stakeholder group. I think we need to have a teacher advisory stakeholder group. And then I know last time, this was prior to my arrival as a school board member, but I thought it was important that board members create a stakeholder group that would also have, an opportunity to be part of the transparency process, so that when all of this information is compiled, everyone understands from whence it's coming from. And I'd like to remind everybody that the Education Foundation here in Sarasota County had volunteered to help with the coordination of meeting notifications, getting all of the advertisements, all those kinds of things, so it's, it's directed with someone who's accountable to make sure all those pieces happen.
If I may, really quickly, I think I agree with the in-person. I think that's a great way to do it. We did town halls, as was mentioned, shortly after our previous superintendent was here. Craig, who is our head of communications, did a fabulous job. And I think that, again, it benefits in a lot of ways. One, we can hear a lot of feedback, and he had some great a platform to do that. It also allows the community to kind of release some of the tension that is beneficial for the superintendent coming in to kind of let that roll out. And then I do think that having 4 of those in various areas of the community, north, central, mid-south, all the way south, might be the best. I think we need to think very thoughtfully about the time in which we do that to maximize all of the different people with different schedules as best possible. The other part is and I think that would benefit wonderfully. I do think when we talk about stakeholders, in my mind, I liked that when board members, when we had what do we call it? A search committee that was board sanctioned. And so each board member, at that time, we selected, I think it was 5. I think that was far too many. It was a committee of 25. I would, if we go down that route, which I would highly recommend we do, that would be maybe 3 per board member. So it's a 15-member committee. I think that's a great way to do the cross-section of different stakeholder organizations, or they represent various cross-sections of the community. And I think that makes it a little bit more, I don't want to say controlled, but allows for a more targeted focus. But in addition to the town halls, I think that we would be able to substantially get feedback from the general public, which is incredibly important. And then when we go to the selection committee, what that was they were really going through the applications and the resumes and providing their feedback, which I really liked because they were part of it. And again, each board member can select 3 to 5 individuals, however we form it. But I think that feedback's beneficial. But I think if they also participate in listening sessions with those town halls, I think they would really also be able to capture, as board members will have to do that too. But that I think we may be able to gather all of the various inputs that we were seeking. I worry a little bit more when we're talking about different groups, because my biggest concern is that we won't capture everyone and then someone will feel alienated. And really, we're so blessed to have so many organizations here. My concern is that may be very difficult to manage, and I certainly don't want anyone to feel that they were left out if we're specifically using groups. And so that's why I think if we could balance that with the selection, like the board sanctioned selection committee that could participate in that fact-finding, gathering information during those town halls, but then also transfer over to the evaluation of the applications. If I recall, and again, we don't have to do it this way, just for information purposes, that committee went through all of the applications, and then they shortlisted them. And I remember it was during COVID because they were all doing on Zoom, but they're available to the public. It's a public meeting because it's board sanctioned. They're appointed by the board. And then they shortlisted it, and then they created the binder, and then a binder went to the board members. Again, we have access to all of them, but it included them into the process. And again, there were a lot of different diverse segments of the population that were included in that, and I thought that was really valuable. So just some thoughts. Mrs. Marinelli and then Mrs. Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think that these are very difficult but also exciting times, but we have a lot of drama. We have a lot of controversy. But I look at this as a new beginning for our district. So I also would like to see different people being selected because, you know, in the past it's been perceived the same people have been on the board select committee for this search. So I think we need to open it up to not have the same people. And I just think I am very concerned but I trust that we will capture the entire community, not just the little vocal subgroups who unfortunately do like to bring up the drama and the controversy all the time.
Right.
So to get the best, we need to have a good representation from our county, and I think this is a great opportunity to have different people on the committees. Thank you.
I want to add in, please, that one of the things that Dr. Joel had suggested, which I held on to, that when we designate groups, that they are invited to those forums, so that we are looking at whole community coming, and we're inclusive of teachers, of parents, and that we're targeting messaging out to any group that actually comes up as a suggestion, but they're all coming to that forum for have the opportunity to come to that. And if we have a focused group, as the board chair suggested, that they are the ones that are processing through and giving us a short list.
If I could also, one of the things that's important is, and I know that the chair brought it up, is that especially, I'm in District 5 representing South County, is that Northport has got extreme growth with Welland Park, extreme growth in South County. You also have the Englewood area that always is overlooked. They feel like sometimes that they don't have a voice. We have an excellent elementary school down there, and great parents, is that when you do this, I'm not sure how many forums you'll be able to put in there, but you're looking at, like, for somebody from Northport to drive here with the traffic on I-75 or on 41, it could take them 2 hours to get here, to be honest. So it would be, when you do that, I think it would be really important to be in the community of Northport. And that is probably a 15-minute ride from Englewood to include them in that forum, because I think that with the growth of that community down there, as in Sarasota as a whole, I just think that that's something that I would want to point out that's important, because we don't want to overlook, that area, because sometimes that they do get overlooked, and they were also the hardest hit during the hurricane. So we want to make sure that that we're down there and we have them to have that opportunity to come to these. So like I said, I just wanted to make sure that they were on your radar.
May I?
Right.
Yeah. I thought we had concluded previously they would be regional in different parts of the county. And that
absolutely.
was the idea that I was reinforcing, and that versus going to small groups and having dialogue within those groups, that we are regionally targeting the county, and reinforcing what Dr. Joel said, and reinforcing what Mr. Enos has said, and that the targeted groups that, of course, we want to make sure they're invited, are all invited to those forums.
Right.
May I, if it's okay, Craig, if you don't mind, because just for perspective, because these were large town halls, and I think when we're talking about doing 4, we would have them in a large auditorium, one of our high schools. But I think for perspective giving, Craig, if you could speak to just what we did so that we were able to capture all of the information, just for reference for you guys to get a sense of what we're envisioning. I think it would be helpful, and that you guys could direct us if you think that makes sense, or maybe tell us what the pros or cons would be. Thank you. I can hear you, but I don't know if it's on.
Big town halls are going to with all this drama.
We're going to have to do some of them, though.
Yeah, but not big, they're talking about huge, they'd rather see small, but whatever, yeah.
Test 1, 2. There
There
we
you
go.
go.
Okay, fantastic. I blew it and turned it off because I was turning it on. Yeah, so we held the town meetings here, and we used a platform called Mentimeter, which allowed us to gather real-time information almost immediately, like a 2 or 3 second delay. Then we collected all that data into an Excel spreadsheet, sifted through it, and then made reports and sent the reports out. And then each individual person can then have this report. We actually posted those reports on the website for people to see. Community could see what they actually said. And then we also advertised this through all of our social media accounts. We solicited all of our constituents, is about 60,000, And the difficulty that we had was not being able to get it to the greater community because we only have so many avenues. But I did share with the Sarasota County government. I have very strong relationships with our community partners. So with this, we would send it to them and ask them to hit their mailing list with it, so we could get not only the police force, we can get the Sarasota County government as a whole,
The chamber, and all the various business
and we would
partners.
just send them out that way, and then ask that they please send to their mailing list. Obviously, there will be a lot of duplication, so you could get duplicate people responding, but at least we would get more of a net to get more of the community.
Thank you. I know, and thank you, because I know we were talking about it, so I wanted to give you kind of some reference of it. And so they were in real-time polls, so if there were certain questions that perhaps you were thinking for the survey, they may be something we could include there. It was teeing up to the Q&A questions. So then there was just an open mic, and again, it was all sorts of commentary, but it's a great fact finding. But there was some I don't want to say narrow, but you were kind of bringing in some of those thoughts. So we were walking away with some very important tasks. And so similarly, as you were mentioning, if you were going to do that Zoom or online, you could incorporate some of those questions with the live audience and then kind of tee over to the public comment. Yeah.
The live audience also, everything is electronic. So what we asked them is to have a cell phone. If they didn't, we brought computers for them to use. So they had to type in their responses. And while they were typing in their responses in this particular format, we had big screens up where they could actually see their response. So they know that I said that, communications is awesome in Sarasota County Schools. It would show up as they said it. So they were scrolling as they were going up, so that then that would absolutely feed on to, oh yeah, I agree with that, or I disagree with that. So then it would spark even further, and we would leave those questions up for anywhere to 5 to 7 minutes. So we would probably gather about, I don't know, over 150 responses per question immediately from the audience members. The difficulty that we had when you were zooming in is there was no way to really gather that information because it was live, because the Mentimeter was live there, and we're sharing a link, and to make sure that it was kind of individual, that you weren't answering 7 times. There's a code in that room. When you put it out on Zoom, then you can't control it as well. And then so people started putting stuff in the chat, which it was very difficult to monitor the chat, just being fully honest, because the chat was blowing up when it was a community feed. So I could work with our IT department, figure out how we can get that chat involved into this as well, if we're going to do Zoom, to make it even a broader net, because we do know everybody doesn't want to come to a public meeting for a variety of reasons, but we could work with that, work with you with your questions and help set that up, or just support you with, how we can support you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Edwards has a comment. Thank you. I just wanted to give you some perspective. So, I mean, again, if you want to kind of process what that is and take away from some of the things that you were thinking, I just wanted to give some perspective. Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, I just would want to say I'm all for the regional concept. I thought we did agree upon that right from the get-go. And I also stress, at least for us, that those are available so that they're not overlapping, because I, as a board member, attended all of those town halls, and it was important information. So I would stress that we would, as board members, at least want the availability to attend all of those town halls, so that they not overlap. I agree with Mrs. Ziegler that we don't want to get the board search committee to be unruly in size. I like the number 3. I think that makes the most amount of sense. And in terms of, I think if we have those town halls, they're certain open to the entire community, that we also have some place where surveys can be done online and dropped in, so that people who are unable to attend a town hall at least feel that they've had an opportunity for representation. But I do think 2 very, very important stakeholders are the students and are the teachers, and they should have their own representation, since they're directly affected by the superintendent search. After those, I can't imagine we're leaving somebody out if everybody has had an opportunity to either be at a town hall or to answer the survey and deposit it so that their voice is heard. I'm comfortable with that as the criteria. And then, as I had mentioned before, sort of turning that over to the Education Foundation and letting them run with the ball to make sure that it all gets set up and all of that scheduling and all of the process. I think the only thing left from my point of view is how do we create a student advisory and how do we create a a teacher advisory?
No, one thing I was going to say and just as we kind of narrow in, for the instructional or our staff, I should say, almost doing, perhaps there would be a town hall specifically for staff. Maybe, and again, even if we did 2 or 3, so we're county-wide, and that is narrowed to them, so it wouldn't be just the general public. I think that would really allow for some really strong feedback, and then perhaps for the student one, just trying to be thoughtful about how we would do that, a similar almost, or at least an option of not a town hall, but doing maybe if it's like right before one of them, something like that. I don't know or logistically how we would do that, but where they would be narrow specifically to that stakeholder group. I think for students would be specific to them and led that way. And then I think doing a stakeholder one just for staff so that their feedback can be very specific. And I think that, and again, we're talking about a lot more, but it's important. And I think they'll be really, when you walk away from these, it's not just the superintendent search, they're just incredibly valuable information gathering. So if that's something we could do, I think we would be able to knock out all of those different things. Mrs. Marinelli and then Mr. Enos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the majority of all the statements from my fellow board members. I just want to make sure when it comes to our staff, especially our teachers, that it's all teachers, not just union member teachers, even though a vast majority of our staff are union members, and that's great. But I want to make sure that all teachers have a voice, not just one segment. And also when I talked about, we do have controversy, and unfortunately in this community, even though we have an excellent relationship with our foundations, I really want to keep everything with our process, the search process, with you all. Okay. Not even having our own education foundation be involved in it. It needs to be transparent, open, and with you guys and the board, not any other entity. That's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Enos?
I guess this is more of a question is how long is usually the forum? And the reason I ask this is, again, just because of, our teachers and administrators do an amazing job during the day, and I know when they come home at the end of the day that they are extremely tired. So I would hate to make it as even a central county forum. So what my question is, how long would it be that you would normally have the forum, and what if you were able to, have you ever done it where, let's say, the first hour was just for teachers, with the amount of employees that we have, that the first hour would be teachers, and then the next 2 hours would be a community forum so that if the teachers couldn't come just for their specific block, you could do the same thing, maybe not at all 4 sites for students, but you would do it centrally or something of that. Have you ever done that before? And is that something that, because again, I think that there, as I talked about professional development, we are ultimately only as good as the workforce and the people that we hire to bring to teach our children. So have you done that before? And is that something that you've seen that would be effective?
So the model has been different in every district, okay? And we have done, for instance, divided up and gone to various elementary schools in the county or in the community after school and had forums for elementary teachers, all elementary teachers, those who wanted to attend. And then because the times are different, then we can do secondary teachers and do it that way after school. And again, open to anyone, okay? And the same, and then we have to work on the middle schools in terms of when their times are and so on. So we've done that, okay? The evening sessions, open sessions, some of them have been 2.5 hours, depending upon the community and what the community had to share, okay? And some of them have been non-televised. I conducted one in Roanoke, Virginia, that was televised, and the news was all there, putting it on the news. So it's taken a variety of approaches. So what I'm hearing, though, what might be the best approach here is for us to work collaboratively with your communications department and do it in a three-pronged way. Send a team here in person. We can divide if we have to attend these community forums using the format that they've used with our questions, but also include the open-ended survey on your district website for folks who can't participate in, or they can't get there, or just for some reason they can't, but they could still answer those questions, and then do targeted by invitation sessions throughout the day, throughout the county. So, and again, our team would divide up and do that. Sometimes we like to work in pairs, but if we can't, we'll do it we'll go alone. The reason why we like to work in pairs is one person facilitates, one person, scribes. But if we combine all of those approaches, and I'm actually thinking, I jotted down perhaps the week of April 24th. I don't know if that's too soon, but people are also going to get angry if they don't have enough lead time for these invitations. But we could come in the week of April 24th and get those stakeholder meetings all accomplished.
Mrs. Rose and then Mr. Edwards.
Thank you. So if I understand you correctly, that there would be targeted in-person for students and targeted in-person regionally for teachers. There would be an online survey where our communications department would send out notice to any stakeholder groups, whether it's the arts community, the chamber, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I'm looking for clarification on two pieces. One, if we're targeting a in-person forum for students and for teachers, I pose the question of for parents.
We could do that as
And
well.
what that would look like, if it would be separate or together with one of those other groups, as well as can anybody come to any of these forums, or are they limited to you're a student, you are a teacher, and or if I feel like if we're targeting in person for students and for teachers, that we need to also include one for parents. So I think just a little clarity on what that's all going to look like.
Yes, we can do that, but I also believe that those evening sessions, from what I'm hearing, anyone could attend. If I'm
That's
hearing
what
that
I'm
correctly.
looking for clarity, so that whatever goes out with the communications department and you're working with them, that as a board, we're aware.
I've had also, just to make a mention, is that I've had just recently in Alexandria City, there was a group that felt that they were not heard by the board, so I conducted an additional Zoom session with those folks. So that they could be heard. So we don't want anyone to feel excluded.
We're targeting, for example, if we're targeting student groups after school, that what I hear you saying is that that's actually open to anyone that wants to come, but specifically for students. Is that what I hear?
Generally, we like to meet with the students.
That's
just
the clarification
students.
I'm looking for.
I like to hear from just the students. They
And
tend to be
then
much more.
Teachers would be
Same
just
thing.
teachers?
Yes.
And then if my
Administrators.
colleagues agree with parents, parents would just be parents.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way that anyone from the general population, as in Sarasota County as an individual, or who might get noticed as a group, like the chamber or the arts community or et cetera, would only have an opportunity to do the online survey. I'm just really looking to,
I
or we're having other
think they'd
open
have the
forums.
ability to do the
General.
online survey or the community forum.
Community. So we'd have 4 community ones, like we said, regionally,
Okay,
for example.
that's-
Then
yeah.
targeted ones for students. I think
Perfect.
for safety purposes, that just is the smarter way. And then one for staff. And if we're doing one for parents, I just have some questions about how are we categorizing that. And then, but yes, I think there's a general, for everybody can come.
That's what I was looking
Yes.
for. Thank you, because I was only hearing the
Yeah.
targeted groups. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you. I wasn't, I assumed that all of, let's say, 4 regionals were for everyone. Everyone. So that gives that wide net so that no one should feel excluded in conjunction with the online survey. Again, so everyone, teachers, parents, whomever. In terms of the student advisory and the teacher advisory, I was looking that those would be more targeted, more specific, more, and perhaps smaller in scope, similar to the board search committee, that there would be a quantifiable amount of students so that, and how the student representatives get the information from their peers and then represent themselves. That's what I was thinking, and the same with the teachers. Not that anyone's voice is not important, but that's where the larger regionals, that's where I was coming from. And my question then for you is, are there best practices that you could share with us that you've seen work in a district similar to our size that would give good representation to student and teacher and parent advisory committees? Is that? And lastly, I certainly wouldn't suggest that the Education Foundation would be less than transparent. My interpretation of what they had offered was merely task-oriented, that they would just be responsible for, so that someone from the district staff wouldn't have to be responsible or accountable for doing that. So whomever does that, it was, I believe, a kind offer to take the tasks off of the board's plate or the district's plate to do that. So however that gets done, I'm open-minded to.
Thank you. So I know we've thrown a lot at you, so I don't know if it takes a minute to just digest it. I think the one part would be looking at a calendar. I just want to be thoughtful about the end of year. We have graduations the second week of May. We have a lot of ceremonies and end of year ceremonies. So however we line that up, I don't know them off the top of my head. I was just looking at my calendar, but being cognizant of that because our families and our staff will be dealing with a lot of that. So if that's, I know you mentioned April 24th. So just however we look at that, if Kathy, you can just review what's on the calendar so that we can say, yeah, that's a good week or no, just being mindful of that. And that would give us enough time. And then perhaps you can provide us a sketch of what that calendar would look like. And then we could start advertising or noticing that. We can bring that forward in the next day or two. Mrs. Marinelli and Mr. Enos, no?
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting the 24th of April to try to get this done prior to your graduations and events.
Yeah, no, yep. So I just wanted to, because ours is the 19th. So we're well within it. I just know the end of year ceremonies start to come, and we may not be in them in April. Maybe it's all May, but I just wanted to make sure.
Right, and then I would suggest that we open the online survey up on that same day, the 24th, and run it for 2 weeks, and then have your forums that week as well, and then everyone would be involved. And to respond to your question about the students, I've seen it work in a lot of different ways. I had a student advisory committee as a superintendent, so that's the group of students that, when they were searching after I left, they met with. But we've had some school districts send a group of students They actually had the ability to bus them to one location from each of the high schools, cross-section of students. So we can work with your district to make sure that we get the appropriate and representation from the students. And the students do fill out the survey online. We get some very interesting responses there.
May I make a suggestion as a thought? In addition to the selection committee, I don't know if it makes sense for them to be part of the selection committee. I think it separately, but perhaps the board could appoint a student committee and have them provide us feedback in an open forum. Is that
I'm sorry, the students, in
So-
addition to the,
a student advisory committee that the board would appoint? So the board would appoint a handful of students and bring them forward so we can hear feedback from them,
in terms of the candidates or in terms
or
of
just information. I think Mr. Edwards had mentioned.
well, we're going to do that for you. I mean, so-
Okay.
and that'll
Okay.
be included in your stakeholder report.
There you go. All right. Nope. Then we don't need extra committees. Mr. Craig, I'm sorry, my brain's not working. Beniglia, sorry.
So we currently have a superintendent student forum, which is made up of all of the high schools. There's several of them. They come to STC once a year, and they're very collaborative. They come up with great ideas for the district and what they'd like to see, the changes. That may be an option to try to pull that group because it's already established and they're already
That's
in
perfect.
place.
That's perfect.
And that's probably, I don't know, I'd say close to 50, 60 students.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's
caliber in
perfect.
our school.
That's perfect.
So maybe that's where we start with the students to kind of,
Get some feedback.
they're already there. That's why I
Yeah.
recommend it.
And Mrs. Marinelli, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, also mindful, we're going to be doing, the students will be doing, and teachers, the state assessments.
Oh, when,
So I don't know the dates specifically of those, but
We'll be mindful of
Mr.
that, believe me.
yeah, Renoff will be able to, we can work with him. The state assessment dates.
Oh, you're correct. Yeah, we have some state assessments finishing up the last week of April. That's on our primary grades, but then the main assessments start the first week of May.
Well, so good, we'll be done with it.
Just as long as we're coordinating and speaking to one another, and we will be flexible, contingent on what you come back with. Mr. Duggan.
Yeah, I just want to add, we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about community forums and committees, and those are two different things. I would urge the board to put some thought into, as far as the committee goes, what you want to task them with and to come up with some criteria about what the objective is, what they'll be doing. Obviously, you want to have an odd number of people on a committee in case there's a close call. You also, as a bare minimum, need to make sure, depending on what you task them to do, you can make a sunshine law obligation. So you want to be thoughtful and deliberate about the committees and how you compose them, what you're tasking them to do, and come up with some criteria so that when you're selecting the people, that they know what they're getting into in advance.
Right. No, and that would be 100% sunshine. That, again, just using what we used in the past, they were tasked with, each board member selected a certain amount. We adopted that as formally as a board, as the selection committee. They reviewed all of the applications as they came in. So if you look at your timeline, they were provided those at the same time. And then they appointed a chair, I believe, if I recall correctly. Then they convened 2 or 3 meetings perhaps to go through all of them and then shortlisted them. I don't recall specifically how many numbers, but that would be something I would assume you guys would assist with. And then, and it was just an opportunity for them to weigh in. The board members got a short list of let's just say 10 or 5, I can't recall. And board members certainly could bring any of the applicants forward that weren't on that short list, but it allowed for just community input in a deeper way. That was what we had done before. That's not required to do that again, but I do believe that warranted a lot of positive feedback. And in addition to those community forums, is a great way to include a variety of stakeholders.
Okay, so if we did that the week of 24th with the stakeholders and so on, we would have the ability by, I think, May 15th to present all the findings from the stakeholder report to you. And then of course, hopefully the goal is to start the advertising process very soon after we get the approval for you on the position description, and have the applications open from April 10th through May 18th. So May 18th would be the closing date for applications. I believe that's a Thursday because we,
Yes, it is.
yes, because our home office wants it to close on a Thursday so that we can answer any questions for applicants who are having difficulty submitting their applications. Then, of course, approximately 2 to 4 weeks after the closing date, and here's where obviously my timelines are going to change a little bit, because what I'm hearing from you is a little different in terms of the process than what we do normally. So if you would choose to have a selection committee of 15 individuals, we would then compile all of the application materials for everyone who applied to the district and create, folders for each of those applicants and get them to the district. And then you would meet your requirements once you get those applications in terms of the sunshine law. And then you would tell us who the committee members are. And then my question, so these, hypothetically, if you have 15 individuals on that selection committee that obviously you are going to appoint, each of you 3, then I just have a couple questions. Would we come down and work with that selection committee and facilitate that? Or would a chairperson be appointed on that selection committee?
Well, before we go down that, is this something the board wants to go forward with? Because it is a little bit different.
It's different than what we do.
Correct, and so I don't want.
But I know that Dr. Joel said this is your search, so we'll tell.
Of course, no, but I want to get the feedback from board members. I know we've done it in the past. I think there's great benefits to it, but again, before we go down that path, I think it makes sense that the board decide that, and then we'll go to the
Good
scheduling.
point.
So if anyone can chime in, please, Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, I think I like the back end of the criteria after we've received the candidates, that the search committee would receive those candidates. And I think what they did was work simultaneous to the board. They culled through those resumes. They made recommendations to the board in terms of which ones they thought would be finalists. And then they actually did interview the finalists that the board selected. So they went to the next step and then made recommendations based upon the finalists themselves. So it was on the back end. At least that was my perception.
Yeah, I don't know if they interviewed, but they definitely went through everything else. The board would get the applications in a rolling format, right? Because there's a handful of weeks, so it wasn't all at one time. We got them throughout the process just to start combing through them, and then the committee they met 2 or 3 times. I think they were scheduled to meet 3, and they actually got through it in 2 at the conclusion of all of the once it had closed, and then they came back with a short list. I don't remember if they interviewed.
I thought it was on Zoom, but
It was on Zoom, yeah, but maybe they did. But and then it comes down to the board. We would go. Then it really, if you look at this, it would include. I would believe it would include one of you guys of your team would include themselves in that search committee discussion to advise and guide, and then. It's just, again, it's simultaneous, and then come back to the board, and then you guys can provide any additional feedback because you're combing through these applications pretty regularly as well. So I think your feedback is largely why we're hiring you guys as well. So, Mrs. Rose, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm good either way with a school board member appointed committee. Whether we have one or don't have one, I'm flexible with that. I think that there are positives and challenges on both sides, and that's the way that we have traditionally done it. Feedback I've gotten from actual committee members, however valid that may be in hearsay, is that they agreed sometimes with the loudest or strongest voice, or those that put the most pressure on. That piece is one to pay attention to. If we do choose to have a school board member appointed committee for the selection process, I would prefer that you are facilitating it versus with your expertise and wisdom in working with groups of people versus someone from inside the committee that is leading it.
I agree. Mr. Enos?
Yeah, I would also say that I think that they would obviously be the chair. I would have somebody from you to be the one that ultimately would be the person that would be bringing it back. And I would agree, because also the same thing is when we look at how many tentacles or how far reaching we can be, if we all then we have this committee, again, it's just more people that they know who have more direct impact, who have more direct input, who have more direct input, and it kind of just reaches out further and further. And I would be in support of doing a 3-member committee with the chair being from your organization, one of the 4 of you, as we move forward.
Okay. Oh, no, you don't have to say anything. I just want to make sure you're good. Okay. So I think it sounds like we would move forward with that. I agree with. I would hope that someone from your firm would lead that process and put forward your expertise. But I do think it kind of hugs the community in a way that I think sets the superintendent up for greater success as well. There's a little bit more buy-in. Do you have any hesitations?
No, it's just different than what we do, but that's okay. We can make that happen. So let me just make sure I'm clear on
Yeah,
this.
of course.
So you'll have 15, let's say 15 folks on this committee that you'll choose. The dates will be determined in terms of when they go through the materials. One of us will be there with them, and we'll help facilitate them to prepare a short list of candidates who they're going to recommend for you. That's 5 candidates generally. Now, here's where it gets a little different for us.
Yeah.
Because once those 5 candidates then are identified for you to interview, as I'll say, they're now the semifinalists, we need to do their reference checking. Because we're not going to do reference checking on all.
Right.
Let's say we got 20 applicants. We're not going to do a deep dive reference check so now they've identified the 5. Then we have to do a deep dive reference into those 5. There's 3 things we have to do. We have to do the deep dive reference into those 5. We have to have each of those 5 candidates prepare the video. It's a 9-minute video, 3 questions that we'll work with you on determining what those 3 questions are, okay? And then the third thing is, what we do is prior to you interviewing those semifinalists, we will do also the background check, criminal, educational, and financial. So it's going to take some time in between when those 5 candidates are identified for you to interview and for us, because we don't want you going forward interviewing if something comes up that's going to be problematic, okay? So then let's then go on the assumption that the 5 candidates are all good. We find everything's fine, the references are good, the background check comes back good, the video's prepared. Then you'll do your 5 interviews of the semifinalists. Then my assumption then is you'll narrow it down, let's say 2 or 3. Will they then go to a public forum or some other type of stakeholder input prior to you making a determination on who you're going to hire? Or once the selection committee sends the 5 to you, will you narrow it down to, let's say, 2 and then have a finalist interview just the board?
So
we need
Robin,
clarity.
I'm going to answer what again, just because it was done this way does not make it the best scenario. So I encourage my board members to weigh in as to what they would like to see. The way I would picture it, and I don't even know if this is the way it was done or not, the selection committee is merely there to do the shortlisting. After that part is when you guys would, like you said, take over, even though you'd be involved in that committee, but then do the background checks as you mentioned. Then the board is taking over their responsibility of interviewing the 5. Then the board comes up. You'll have to guide us on how there's a very different way of selecting the going from 5 to, let's say, 2 or 3. And then that in the past has historically been done. Those, what are they? Not semifinalists, but the finalists. Then there were community forums in the past where it's an open house situation where one in the North County, one in South County, where members of the community can meet with the semifinal or the finalists, excuse me. And then it comes back to another interview, if I recall, and then the board makes a final decision. That is what I recall, not necessarily being the perfect scenario, but I would say that the committee is only there to participate in that initial shortlisting, and then the rest would be, I believe, warrants the board's responsibility in conjunction with your staff.
So when the 2 or 3 candidates go to those community forums, then do the folks who are at the community forum fill out some sort of feedback form for you to look at prior to your final interviews? Just trying to find out, A, the purpose of that, okay, and B, how you use that information in terms of determining who your finalist is that you're recommending to be approved. Because that, there could be different issues that arise from that as well.
Mr. Enos?
Yeah, I would think that it would be handled similar to the other community forums, is that you would be the facilitator of it, and that they would have there, and it'd be like an open house. They would be able to speak, to talk, to give a message, to talk to them, and then you would compile, even if it was something, again, that we use technology-wise, that you would maybe compile something to be able to provide to us of what you just got in regarding to the feedback of the forum. But ultimately, I think it comes back to the same thing. We would do the interviews, et cetera, et cetera. Just to have an open house, so that people can see them. I don't know how much of that benefit of input we would get back for doing that, other than just to have them kind of, I don't want to say on display, but it would be, to me, I'd rather get, if we're going to do it, I'd rather have something useful out of it.
Yeah.
Instead of just doing it just to do it, to say, oh, this is who this looks like, this is, and this is.
Right.
I got you.
That's what I would look at, and again, and have the facilitation be from you guys to be able to make sure that it also stays within what the scope is, too.
Mrs. Marinelli, did you want it? Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just really listening to my fellow board members and what you have to say, and I do not mean this to be cynical or disrespectful in any way. I'm really asking you, how do you determine through your selection that we're getting the highest level and not a district that wants to get rid of their superintendent by giving good recommendations?
Jump in after I jump in. Well, first of all, we don't rely on paper, okay? It's through the reference checking process. We have to dig deep and talk to people, not just the folks who are on the application as here are my references. We have to go deeper and talk to other people who don't, may not be listed. And we said, tell us a few people who may know this person. And we have a network of, for districts like this, okay, we have a network of consultants throughout the country. And our consultants know the people who perhaps may be applying for this kind of position. So it's important for us to try to ask the question, not that you said you did this, but did you do this?
Right.
Okay?
Right, no, and I would agree. And on top of that, that's why it was so important that we look today at this criteria, so that we know what you're looking for, that we make a good match for you. And in no way will we ever get you someone that someone else doesn't want, unless it's for a reason that isn't valid, perhaps. Do you know what I'm saying?
And as retired educators, you know exactly what I'm
Right,
talking about,
exactly,
'cause
right,
we've all been
exactly. No, that we can
So-
guarantee will not happen. That would
thank
be
you.
really very bad for us to do that.
It does.
And I'll also mention in terms of the process with this search committee you're going to have put together, what we're finding now is we're not getting an extensive amount of applicants for the superintendency. So if we get, if we get 15 applicants, right, out of those 15 applicants, 5, 6, 7 of them are going to be people who apply for every job that we post.
Right.
So it's just important for me to mention that. Recently in Alexandria City, we had 32 applicants, but out of the 32 applicants, 15 of them or 16 of them were just not viable. And then when we started digging down to the ones that looked great on paper, we found no, this person's not being offered the contract next year. This person, so it really narrowed it down to 6, 7 people that we really vetted prior to presenting our 5. Or no, we presented 5 to the board. Yeah, 5. See, that's the way that we do it, our protocol. But like I said, we're adapting to you.
No, that's a good point. Mr. Edwards and Mrs. Rose, and then we'll go back.
Yeah, I was not part of the last process, but I was running for office during the process. So I think the last superintendent was selected or seated in July, and our election was in August. So my recollection of the process was there was, I want to say it was maybe even 10 that came from the committee, the search committee, and then the board went from the 10 and selected 5, and I believe that's what happened. And then the 5, there were not town halls, to Mr. Enos's point. There was a chance for those 5 to come and observe the school district and travel on buses and go from school to school and that sort of thing. And that was the time, simultaneous, that the board had their one-on-ones with those 5 candidates. Right. And then, again, my recollection is then the board sat down and gave their choice all at once of who their selection was. I mean, that was, and I'm not, into Mrs. Ziegler's point, I'm not advocating that that's the process, but that's my recollection of the last process.
Mixing 2 different
So I do have to leave, but I wanted to say that the 2 things that I was most interested in terms of our criteria and the transparency to the community and the community's involvement, those 2 were the 2 largest things that were important to me, and I trust my fellow board members, to be able to get to the selection criteria process for who would be in the best interest of the school district. So I thank you for being here. It's good to see you again. I bumped into you at COSBA, and COSMA, and good to see you. Thank you, everyone.
I know you have to leave, Mrs. Rose, because I do have one question on the committee, and if you have a couple seconds. Mrs. Rose.
Well, that's where I was going to go. If you feel in earnest, given the candidate pool, that you'll be narrowing it down for us, are we setting up a committee to not really give us or do the work or feedback? So the committee comes into question, that's one. And secondly, you referenced 3 questions for a candidate video interview. And will you be drafting something as a proposal for us to work from based on the criteria that we've given you to expedite this process? And then thirdly, of wherever we land with the committee, given your recent input on the candidate poll and what you narrow that down to based on background and doing a deeper dive into those individuals, I think it's important that it's reiterated throughout the process that whatever you or depending on what my colleagues decide, a committee narrow it down, that the board has the option of including one of the original candidates in the short list.
Yeah. We could add one back.
Right.
Yes, I would assume so.
Right. Okay, so
Yeah. Well, really
question.
quickly,
I
just
just-
for
I'm
his
sorry.
timing, I just, because I was going to say the same thing, is you mentioned something about because we're at a different time nationally with the amount of superintendent searches, and so the candidate pool is likely smaller than what historically we've experienced just in general. So if you have a committee that's going from 20 to 5 or 10 or 5 versus 8, I mean, is the committee worthwhile? And I don't know, perhaps we can evaluate how many applicants we have coming forward and then make that decision?
Well, if I can interject, you have in our protocol, our model, there is a place for that committee, but it's not where you have the committee placed. Let's see, what I would, again, I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Go, yeah,
Make a
please.
recommendation.
Yes.
What I would do is allow us to do the work. Okay? Let us present to you the 5, maybe 6 candidates. And that's going to be a healthy percentage of the people who are qualified in terms of the application pool because of the number of applicants. And then we do all the work, we do all the vetting, we do the videos, working with you, making sure you're comfortable with the questions. And those questions don't only come from the criteria. One of those questions may come from the results of the stakeholder meetings, okay? And then we present the 6 candidates to you. We come in, it's going to be public, okay? We're going to show the videos. We're going to give you all the information. And then you take that committee that you appoint, 3 of you, that's 15 people, right? And we then come in and facilitate with that committee to meet those candidates and give you feedbacks. We have a form that we use, sealed.
Yep, okay,
And
we
we
like that. I think
coach-
that everyone's happy with
We
that.
coach the committee and we say to them, look,
Thank you.
the board has appointed you to this committee. We call it the Stakeholder Committee. What do you want to
Yeah.
call it? The board has appointed you to this committee. They want your feedback. However, you are advisory.
Right.
You're not picking the superintendent. That's the board's job. We work with them, okay? And then they provide that feedback to you. You read that feedback, and then you have your final interviews. Then you go do your interviews.
This is why we hired you, because we all like your idea there. That's much better. And Mrs. Mrs. Veronelli says,
That's what I want.
okay, Mr.
Ditto, yeah.
Good.
I just, one correction, sir, if I may. Did you rent a car when you came here?
Did I rent?
Did you rent a car? Did you drive around Sarasota? Did you see the traffic?
Yes.
Yes.
I would
we
tell
were
you
part
that
of it.
this is Sarasota. Everybody wants to live here. This is the #1 travel destination. I think you'll be surprised at the amount of applicants. This isn't Virginia.
No.
I'm trying to make a little joke. I'm just saying.
No, I understand.
think
That was unique. That was very unique. That district. We have been getting. If we get 15, 20 applicants, we will be very, very happy. But out of those, they're not going to, believe me, a lot of them, there are some folks that we really would like to coach and say, all right, you do this application every time we have an opening. You know, we see them, right?
Right.
Well, we're going to shoot for more than anyone else because we think that.
Well,
I
we
can
will-
tell you is
we
that
will
this
as
is a
well.
special place.
But even with
And they'll
that, even
come.
if we get more, this is a better protocol in terms of your committee.
Oh, I like what you, I really, I like that. It was a much improved situation.
It's like Field of Dreams, you know. If you post it, they will come.
Okay.
I'm just saying. That's my last comment.
It is a beautiful community. I love it
I
down.
re- I know,
You have
I-
a great beach.
That was a very
Yeah, I
improved recommendation. Mrs. Rose.
I'm very much like the way that you have done it. You're experienced at this, and I think that it actually alleviates my concerns of the rhetoric that comes out of that committee historically and individuals' perceptions, and puts it in a spot where I'm really most interested in their feedback. So, thank you for that suggestion.
So that doesn't mess up the timeline, so everything,
No,
that's great.
actually it improves the
Sorry,
timeline.
we wasted a little bit of time to get to that point, but.
So it improves the timeline. So, and then the week of, so that's when we would do that in early June. I know we'd have to work around your graduations and all that.
Yeah, May 19th is, I believe, our first graduate.
Okay. And that's why I pushed the interviews into early or late June, early July, mid-July, August, because of, getting through your graduation season and making sure your availability. Now that we can adjust any of those in terms of the selection process, but it could be pushed up sooner. But these are just target dates.
Yeah, no,
So as we meet with you, we're going to, I'm sure
that's what I
these
was
will
going to
change.
say. As far as through the week of, concluding with getting this notice out and, moving in through the estimated time frames of the application being open and then close date. And I think that's all very reasonable and lines up well. And as we get a little bit closer, then the week of June or June 12th, we can narrow in on that. Actually, I mean, I still think that still works fine. If you're looking at a May 18th close date, then you guys are going to be doing your due diligence at that point. Is that
Right.
correct?
Right, yes.
So unless there's without objection, I think everything up until that June 5th to June 12th is reasonable, and we won't be able to discern as to what the semifinalist looks like until
Exactly. I think the last part where it says late June on is subject to revision.
Yeah.
certainly. So if we're going to post, if this is all going to be posted under a website under a tab, superintendent search, I'll change this to subject to change at any point in time that it's a proposed timeline, so people don't lock you into these dates.
Perfect. And board members, I just because I think our communications department has been doing a fabulous job, and Craig, I know you guys have a lot on your plate, so I don't want to add that, but are you guys opposed? I would prefer to keep it in here versus adding a third party to it. I just want to make sure that's something you can do and that you guys would work with Craig specifically to make sure all of that. Okay.
Yep. Okay, and then, so item 6 is just listed where we will advertise. That's all included in our proposal. Okay, and then, of course, we'll be sending out thousands of emails throughout the country to our applicant pool, to our consultants. We've already started calling people. As I mentioned to Attorney Duggan before, one of the challenges, obviously, in Florida is the sunshine laws. And the challenge being, if you have, we reach out to superintendents who are under contract and they're awesome superintendents, and they'll say to us, well, I really can't, it's, my name, as soon as I apply, is going to be all, and it could create issues for me in my current district. So they have to think that through. I mean, I was a superintendent, and I had those challenges as well because of being in New York and New Jersey. Nothing's confidential, even though it's confidential, But any which way. But, that's a risk you have to take, but very often folks are not willing to take that risk. But we're certainly starting to make those calls already.
Right.
Are there any other so I recall you showing us the places, the venues in which you advertise, but is there any benefit in expanding it outside of the usual places? I know there's potentially an incurred cost, but
Well, these are those that are most successful for us. I mean, I would imagine Florida school boards. Do they
yeah, but I mean,
post?
we can just search north
That's
and
in-
south of us because
Yeah,
I can see which.
But most effectively are these that are listed, and even more effectively is our network.
That's what I would assume.
Yeah.
So okay.
And then we'll be working with your communications department on the brochure, and then we're to the point where we'll answer any additional questions that you have, although you've asked many of them and excellent questions throughout the meeting. And by the way, I drove down from Lake Mary, so I left 4:30 a.m.
I-4.
But I did hit the traffic on 75.
I was like, was it I-4? Oh, it's the worst. My only other question is, and I don't, maybe perhaps it doesn't need to come before this gets released, certainly not before that gets released, but was whether or not you guys had intended to meet with each board member to try to dive in a little bit deeper about what we're looking for and whether you'd advise against that or for that. I just sometimes.
That might be appropriate when the team is here for the
Okay.
stakeholder meetings. Carve out a little time if that's something you'd like us to do.
I think it would help. I do. I think that especially as you're going through candidates,
Right.
there's depth that could be provided and
Yeah.
for,
And I know that, I apologize, Mr. Edwards isn't here, but I know he had mentioned about board members attending the forums. Certainly that's your call, but generally we recommend not to
we attend, just don't speak.
Right.
Well, what we recommend is attend, introduce us, and leave. But that's your choice. It's your search.
I think that's always. I
Well, I'll tell you why. People are more
Open.
when we're not there, I think they feel pretty comfortable being open.
Well, this is our experience, right? I mean, you disagree?
Welcome to
No,
Sarasota.
absolutely not.
We are all for.
Well, if everybody's
Get
open,
out
then
there.
it doesn't matter.
I like your suggestion.
No. Well, I'll leave it to the board members, but I think the only point is just as long as we don't engage, it's more listening. Mr. Migniglia, why I keep wanting to say Craig. It's Marinelli. That's why I keep wanting.
Would these be recorded to these meetings, but you want these to also be recorded and put out on our
YouTube channel.
YouTube and cable?
That's your call, so whatever you want to do.
If we can, I know that's a lot of work. I always say yes. I mean, if we can do that, the more the merrier.
Pardon me?
You can put a little QR code out there.
He did not. No, he did not.
There you go.
He did say he did.
But no, I mean, if we can, and I know those are off-site, they're a little bit more challenging, but I think that if someone's missing it, they can't go to it, but then they can go back and listen to the questions or anything like that.
Monday night anyway, so that would,
Right.
that Monday and Tuesday probably works the best that week.
Did we record them before?
I don't believe so. I think we did.
I thought we did for the town halls. Jamal. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can talk.
Dog and pony show, we gotta bring everything, set it up and test it.
I say for this, if we err on the side of as fully accessible as possible. Yeah, you knew that was going to be my answer. Are there any other items?
No, I think that's right. Good.
No?
Thank you.
Well, we got done an hour early. It's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for that feedback. It's very much why, and please always bring forward your expertise.
Thank you.
That is why
Yes.
we brought you in. So I appreciate that.
So what I'm going to do is drive home and, now, I think under Florida law, we have to leave these for the record.
Yeah, they just need to copy that.
So can we take pictures?
You can take pictures. Anything you create, you need to retain and be able to produce upon request, so.
Thank you.
So photos and that's it. All right. So in seeing that there's nothing else, I guess, so just want to make sure that you're going to provide a summary of this to Mrs. Tompkins.
I'm going to take this and put it into that document, the position description, and I'm going to send it to Kathy as soon as I can.
Perfect. And Mrs.
Hopefully by the
Tompkins
end
will
of
release
today.
it to each board member. And only board members go back to Ms. Tompkins just if there are any major changes. And then unless there's any major objection, that would be incumbent upon you to release.
Okay.
Okay, everyone good? Any additional thoughts, questions? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you so
Thank
very
you.
much.